There is a moment in every human being's life where faith ceases to be a comfortable theory and transforms into a bloody battle for the survival of the soul. It's that instant when you're on your knees, not out of devotion, but because your legs simply can no longer sustain the weight of the pain you carry. It's when your prayers stop being eloquent and become muted screams, when heaven seems made of bronze and your tears seem to be the only liquid that still flows in an existential desert that consumes everything around you. Perseverance in the midst of tribulation is not about smiling while the world crumbles. It's about continuing to breathe when each breath seems to pierce your lungs with shards of glass. It's about waking up tomorrow when today has already been far too unbearable. And the brutal truth that few have the courage to verbalize is this: God did not promise that you wouldn't go through the fire. He promised that He would be in the fire with you, and that the fire would not be your end, but your beginning. The question that should terrify us is not, why am I suffering? But rather, what will happen to me if I give up now, just inches away from the greatest transformation of my existence? We live in a generation that has confused faith with the absence of problems, that has transformed the gospel into a spiritual painkiller and reduced the cross to a decorative symbol that we hang around our necks. We've forgotten that Christianity was born in catacombs, not in cathedrals, that the apostles wrote about joy while bleeding in Roman prisons, that Christ Himself sweat blood before conquering the resurrection. Tribulation is not an anomaly in God's plan for your life. It is the chisel He uses to sculpt His likeness in you. Romans 5:3-4 is not a poetic suggestion, it's a transformation manual. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. Observe the divine sequence. Tribulation does not produce despair, it produces perseverance. Perseverance does not generate bitterness, it generates character. Character does not culminate in cynicism, it culminates in hope. But this spiritual alchemy only happens when you refuse to abandon the process midway. Gold does not choose the fire, but it is in the fire that it discovers it was never just stone. You are in the fire now. The question is, will you emerge as refined gold or as ashes of an abandoned dream? Let me tell you about a man named Joseph, whose name means God will add, but whose life seemed to be a constant subtraction. He didn't ask to be his father's favorite, didn't choose to have prophetic dreams, didn't plan to be hated by his own brothers. At 17, he was thrown into an empty cistern, a perfect metaphor for what many of us feel. Being in a dark hole, surrounded by walls too high to climb, screaming to people who chose not to hear. But the cistern was just the first chapter. Sold as merchandise, enslaved in a foreign land, falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit, thrown into a prison where he interpreted dreams that came true for others while his own seemed like corpses rotting in the desert. 13 years. More than a decade between the dream and its fulfillment. 13 years where each morning was a brutal choice between persevering or perishing. And here's the truth that most superficial preaching ignores. Joseph didn't know he would be Prime Minister of Egypt. He didn't have a divine timeline guaranteeing that everything would work out in chapter 41. He persevered without knowing the end of the story, only trusting that the God of his fathers had not become mute or indifferent. The diabolical genius of tribulation is that it doesn't just attack your circumstances, it assaults your identity. When Joseph was in Potiphar's house, he was no longer Jacob's beloved son, he was a nameless slave. When he was in prison, he was no longer the man of prophetic dreams, he was the forgotten number so-and-so in a windowless cell. Tribulation has this corrosive power to make you forget who God said you are. It whispers lies with the voice of logic. Look at your situation. God has abandoned you. Your dreams were youthful illusions. You are a failure. And it is precisely here that perseverance reveals its deepest nature. To persevere is not just to continue. It is to continue being who God said you are, even when everything around you screams that He was wrong. It's saying, I am a child of the King when you're dressed in rags. It's declaring, my God is faithful when all evidence suggests abandonment. It's prophesying over dry bones when you yourself feel dead inside. Joseph persevered because he understood something revolutionary. The absence of change in circumstances does not mean the absence of God in the circumstances. God was as present in the cistern as he would be in the palace. The difference was not divine presence, but divine purpose being forged through the process. James 1:2-4 contains one of the most counterintuitive instructions in all of Scripture. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Pay attention to the language. It doesn't say if you face trials, but when you face them. It's not a possibility, it's a certainty. It's not a detour on the path of faith, it is the path itself. But here's the insight that changes everything. James is not asking you to fake joy while you bleed. The Greek word for joy here is chara, which is not a superficial emotion, but a deep sense of blessedness that comes from understanding that there is purpose in the process. It's the joy of the farmer who endures the brutal work of plowing because he can mentally see the future harvest. It's the joy of the woman in labor who endures extreme pain because she knows she is giving birth to a life. It's the joy of Christ who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, scorning its shame. Hebrews 12:2. He saw through the suffering. You need to learn to see through yours as well. Here's a truth that will make you uncomfortable. Some blessings can only be born in the womb of tribulation. There are dimensions of God you will never know in times of abundance. There is intimacy with the Father that is only forged when you are so broken you can't even formulate complete prayers. David would never have written, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing," if he hadn't experienced lack. He would never have declared, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me," if he hadn't walked through valleys where death was a constant shadow. Paul would never have discovered that God's grace is sufficient and that Christ's power is made perfect in weakness, 2 Corinthians 12:9, if he hadn't pleaded 3 times for the removal of his thorn in the flesh. There was a treasure hidden in that thorn, a revelation that could only be mined through unremoved pain. You are crying out for the removal of your thorn now, but what if God is answering your prayer not by removing the thorn, but by revealing a dimension of his grace that you would never have known any other way? What if your tribulation is not evidence that God forgot you, but proof that he is preparing you for something that requires a stronger version of you? Authentic perseverance is not stoic passivity. It is active resistance against spiritual erosion. It is a daily war against the temptation to become bitter, to blame, to give up, to become cynical. Every day you choose not to harden your heart is a monumental victory that heaven records. Every morning you get up and say, "Yet will I trust him." When you have 1,000 reasons not to trust, you are defeating principalities and powers in the invisible realm. Hebrews 10:36 is not a cute verse to embroider on pillows. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. Note the order. First you persevere, then you do the will of God. Because doing God's will in tribulation requires perseverance. And then, only then, do you receive the promise. The promise doesn't come to shorten the process. It comes as a result of the completed process. Joseph received the palace, but only after the prison finished its work. Christ's resurrection was glorious, but only after the cross fulfilled its purpose. Your miracle is coming, but it won't come to spare you from the process. It will come because you survived the process without losing your soul along the way. There is a verse in 1 Peter 1:6-7 that should be tattooed on every Christian's soul. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now, for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Take a moment and let this penetrate. Your faith is more valuable than gold. Not your possessions, not your achievements, not your reputation, your faith. And just as gold needs to be refined by fire so that impurities are removed, your faith needs to be tested by tribulation so that everything that is false, superficial, and performative is burned away. What remains after the fire is not a lesser faith, but a pure faith, not a faith based on favorable circumstances, but a faith anchored in the unchanging character of God. This kind of faith cannot be produced in seminaries or acquired by reading inspirational books. It can only be forged on the anvil of suffering, under the repeated blows of adversity, tempered in the bitter waters of betrayal, sharpened on the rough stone of disappointment. And when it emerges, oh, when it emerges, it is indestructible. You are in the forging process now. The heat is unbearable. But what is being produced in you is worth more than all the treasures of this world. So here we are, at the place where theology meets the bleeding reality of your life at this exact moment. You are in tribulation. Maybe it's a medical diagnosis that stole your breath. Maybe it's a betrayal that shattered your trust in human relationships. Maybe it's a financial loss that demolished your plans. Maybe it's a door closed so violently that the splinters are still embedded in your soul. Maybe it is simply the accumulated weight of years trying to remain faithful, while the world around you seems to reward the wicked and forget the righteous. And you are tired. God, how tired you are. Tired of being strong, tired of having faith, tired of waiting, tired of believing it will get better when everything only seems to get worse. I'm not going to offer you insulting cliches. I wouldn't tell you that God won't give you more than you can handle. That's not in the Bible, and it's a cruel lie. But I will tell you this. God promised that he will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear without providing a way out, 1 Corinthians 10:13, and that he will complete the good work he began in you, Philippians 1:6. The only way he can fail at this is if you give up before he finishes. Your tribulation has an expiration date that only God knows. Your suffering has a purpose that will only be fully revealed in eternity. But today, in this moment, your only responsibility is to choose to persevere for one more day. Not for the entire year, not for the whole month, just today. Tomorrow, you will make the same choice again, and the next day. And God, who is faithful, will give you sufficient grace for each of those days, until the day comes when you will look back and see that he carried you through the valley you were certain would kill you. Here is your call to action, and it's not something you can do halfway. Stop asking God to remove the tribulation and start asking him to reveal what he is producing through it. Change your prayer from God, get me out of here, to God, what do you want me to become here? This shift in perspective doesn't make the pain less, but it transforms you from victim to active participant in your own refinement. Refuse to waste your suffering. It's already costing too much, at least let it transform you. Choose today not to become bitter. Choose not to blame God. Choose not to contaminate others with your cynicism. Choose to believe there is purpose even when you can't see it. And when you can't choose this for yourself, ask the Holy Spirit to choose through you. Persevere, not because you are strong, but because the God in whom you trust is strong. Not because you can see the end, but because you know the one who sees the end from the beginning. And when you finally emerge on the other side, and you will emerge, because he who began the good work in you is faithful to complete it, you will not be the same person who entered. You will be stronger, deeper, more compassionate, more dependent on God, and less impressed with the superficial things that once consumed you. You will be gold, and the world desperately needs gold, not fool's gold. So take a deep breath, rise up one more time and persevere. Because your story does not end in tribulation, it only begins there.